So welcome everyone. I am Julie Zuckerman, author of the Book of Jeremiah, and welcome to the July Literary Modiin author event. Before we get started, I'll say a few words of introduction, and I know some of you have heard me say this a million times already, but some of you are new. So for those of you who haven't been to a Literary Modiin event, first I'll start with what is Modiin. It's a planned city in Israel, about halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Right near the airport, which is a little dysfunctional at the moment, the airport, but still come and visit anyway. Just bring, don't check any bags. Bring a carry-on. So come visit. In Literary Modiin started in June 2019. We have a large population of English speakers here. And I started Literary Modiin as a way to bring local Israel-based authors to the large community of English readers we have here in Modiin. We had a few in-person events, and then when the pandemic hit, we switched to a virtual format, which allows us to hear from authors and welcome attendees from all over the world. Today's event is our 27th, so yash koach to all of us and to all of you who have been coming to these events. Thank you. The format of the event is that each author speaks for about 15 minutes, and then we open it up to questions. And we have a large attendance today, so everybody's on mute. So you can put your questions in the chat box, and if you have any technical difficulties, you can send that in a private note to me in the chat. As you heard when you joined, we're broadcasting this live on Facebook in Literary Modiin, so you can start a watch party if you want. And now I will turn it over to our first author. Ariela Freedman was born in Brooklyn and has lived in Jerusalem, New York, Calgary, London, and Montreal. She has a PhD from New York University and teaches literature at Concordia University's Liberal Arts College in Montreal. Her debut, Arabic for Beginners, was shortlisted for the QWF, Concordia University First Book Prize, and it won the 2018 J.I. Siegel Prize for Fiction. And her second novel, A Joy to Be Hidden, was shortlisted for the Siegel Prize in 2020 and was a finalist for the Paragraph U McLennan Prize for Fiction. Leah, I don't know, or you'll tell us it's pronounced Leah or Leah, is based, her latest novel, which came out this year, is based on the life of famed activist Leah Roback, and it's her latest novel. Ariela lives in Montreal. So Ariela, take it away. I will spotlight you now.
Great. I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of images. Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you for running this. It was really great to meet you. I met Julie in Israel a couple months ago when I was at the Creative Writing Conference at Bar-Ilan. And it turns out we have friends in common, and she's a writer as well and has been publishing and running these wonderful events. So really happy to connect to her, and really happy actually to see Aposthy right here, whose anniversary I met her at. So, actually my mom is here as well. So thank you so much for having me. This is my third novel. It's my first historical novel. And because lots of people don't know who Leah Roback is outside of Montreal, I thought I'd talk a little bit about who she was and why I decided to write a historical novel. It was not a genre that I thought I was going to explore. My other books are pretty contemporary. They're set in places and in times that I've lived in, and historical novels are an enormous amount of work, and they require all of this research and felicity, and actually a different kind of contract with the material and with the reader than I was accustomed to. So the reason that I wrote a historic novel was that I learned about this woman whose life compelled me so much, and who I wanted to learn more about. She was born in Montreal, and this is a big mural that features her, which used to be on the Plateau Montreal. The Plateau is a neighborhood in Montreal where lots of Jewish immigrants arrived. There used to be a lot of textile factories over there. Mordechai Richter lived over there. Leonard Cohen lived over there as well. So it's a storied part of Montreal Jewish history, and it's where Leah Roback was from as well. I learned about her on a history walk, which ended at this mural. And what I found out was that she was a union activist and a suffragette women in Montreal only get the vote in 1940. It's the latest in all of Canada. It's actually like appallingly late. So she fought for that, and she fought for abortion rights, and she was an anti-nuclear war activist. And she basically worked all her life for the rights of disadvantaged people. So my first reaction was, how do I not know about this person? How can I learn more about her? And through learning about her, how can I learn about this moment in Montreal history and actually in Jewish history that's really compelling to me, and I think somewhat understudied. Like, if you look at even historical Jewish novels, there's kind of Holocaust novels and shtetl novels, and maybe not as much in between. But that period in the 1930s, when all of these Jews in North America were arriving from Europe and were involved in radical politics, Leah Roback, like lots of other activists at that time, was a communist. That period, I knew less about it, and I wanted to know more about it, and I thought other people would want to know more about it. So this mural actually doesn't exist anymore. It was defaced, and it was defaced so many times that the city painted it over, which is a sad thing that happens. But I got permission from the artist to put it on the cover of my book, where it now lives intact. And maybe one day I will be able to get him to paint it somewhere else in the city. If you ever come to Montreal, you'll see it as like a city of street art and of murals. And I really loved getting to see her face. Leah Roback was born in 1903, and her family ran a general store outside of Quebec City. This is from the archive at the Jewish Public Library, where I did a lot of the research for my book. And there were all of these Jewish families in little towns all over North America running general stores or working as peddlers. And often they'd be the only Jews in town. And in that way, they had a really unique perspective on the society that they lived in. So one of the things that happened when Leah moved to Beauport is that her French got really, really, really good. She was somebody who was fluent in French and in Yiddish and in English. She was somebody who moved between languages and cultures with extraordinary audacity and facility. So she never got married. She never had kids. She went and studied in Paris, in Grenoble, in Berlin. This is a picture from her Paris years. This is a picture from a lake outside of Berlin. In Berlin, she joins the Communist Party. She meets Bertolt Brecht, who calls her the Canadian. She meets Kat Kollwitz, and Kat Kollwitz, who's this incredible artist, she organizes an exhibit of art against war with Kat Kollwitz. She leaves, as Hitler is rising to power. So she's at the May Day rally and then riot, and then she ends up being there like at the very beginning of the racial law. So she gets out just in time, and she comes back to Montreal, and in Montreal she gets involved, I'll go ahead, in something that's called the Modiin strike. So the Modiin strike was a strike of garment workers in Montreal in 1937. And it was incredibly hard to organize the women garment workers in Montreal. Montreal was a capital of the garment industry, and a lot of the clothes all over North America were made there. And after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, city after city had been implementing like more rules and more safety restrictions, and unions had been starting also all over North America. This is another reason I was really interested, I think, in writing this book, because I felt like the story of union activism seemed very current right now, as we reach a moment in which those fights are so urgent once more. So Montreal had two kinds of workers in the garment industry. They had Jewish women, often immigrant women, Yiddish speakers coming from Eastern Europe and what had become the Soviet Union. And they had French Canadian girls from the provinces outside of Montreal. And all of those French Canadian girls were told by their churches, don't have anything to do with the Jews that you work with. Like, they are bad people, and you're going to go to hell if you organize with them. That's a sort of a short version of their warning. So because Leah had this incredible fluidity and fluency, not just between languages, but between cultures, she ended up being the linchpin between those communities. She went and embedded in a factory, and she helped organize all of these garment workers, these Yiddish girls and these French-speaking girls. And together they won one of the first important historic victories in Canada for the labor movement. And it wasn't just a victory in Canada, because if you have a place that is kind of a center of industry, that isn't organized and where there aren't any rules, like, even if you organize and improve things in other cities, the factories will just move to Montreal. Everybody knew, like, move to Montreal and you can make people work as many hours as you want, and move to Montreal, and you don't have to make sure that you have, good air circulation and safe exits. So after 1937, Leah Roback helped change that. So here's another picture of them all voting for the Union in the Union Hall, which is an amazing picture because you can see they've all got their hands up at once. And that's a picture of her actually marching much, much later. So I wanted to learn more about this extraordinary woman. I spent weeks in the archives at the Jewish Public Library, which have her letters and articles and her pamphlets and her diaries. There are canceled passports. There are ticket stubs. There's a cancer diagnosis. There's a blue silk box with a lock of gold hair and a lock of auburn hair. I saw that it was pretty clear from her writing that she had tried to write her life story, but she'd never gotten very far in it. She did write case studies about working women for the radio, and you can see that she kind of revised her transcripts. And because I was writing a historical novel and I was looking for the balance between, when you need to be felicitous, when you need to be absolutely faithful, and when you need to be absolutely truthful, and when I was allowed to invent, I felt really reassured by the clear evidence that she edited. She spoke to these women, but then she edited in order to turn it into a story. A life is not a novel. Novels have a certain kind of arc. You make decisions about places to put the emphasis. And I had to decide what kind of story I was able to tell, what kind of story I was allowed to tell about a real person, not just a real person, a beloved person. Tons of people in Montreal knew her. She died in 2000. I never met her. I knew that if I published this book, people would be showing up to events and saying, maybe saying, you got this terribly wrong. Novalis says that novels make up for the shortcomings of history. And I think there are all kinds of things that novels can do that history books can't. They can imagine what it is like to be inside and experience. They can explore the subjectivity of a character. I cannot claim that I got everything right, but it has come as a huge relief to meet, fellow activists, family members, and to have them say to me, yeah, I recognize this person that you wrote about, in that weird like alchemy or channeling that is writing the life of a person. There was a way in which I felt like I was in communion with her, but I couldn't tell if that feeling was going to translate onto the page or to anybody who actually knew her, who could call me out on my sense of filiation. Either people have been too polite to do that, or I've just been like incredibly fortunate. One of the absolute best responses was at an early event. There was a 96-year-old woman who was an activist with Leah Roback, worked with the same communist member of parliament, Fred Rose, to get him elected. And I read this little excerpt from my book, and at the end of my presentation, she said, so many memories. And anyway, so that was a lovely thing. I'm going to read just a brief passage before I wrap up. And this is about the Modiin strike of 1937. This is Leah Roback waiting to see if the women are going to, as planned, really going to all walk out and paralyze the garment industry so that they can finally win some of the battles that they've been fighting for fair wages and safe conditions and reasonable hours. By mid-morning, they're 5,000 strong, standing shoulder to shoulder. They extend for blocks. They shout and laugh and hold placards and sing songs. With the power of their bodies, they refuse their exploitation. It takes a little while for the police to show up, and when they do, they stand in confused, restless clusters, watching the girls, not sure how to proceed. In Ontario, at the General Motors strike, Hepburn's hussars rushed the lines with billy clubs. In Chicago, they used tear gas and pistols. But these are girls. What do you do with girls? Some of their protesters in new spring coats and spring hats drift towards the police horses and pet them. The cops aren't sure if they're there to flirt or to fight. As a girl strokes the muzzle of a police horse, the animal dips his head. It seems like they've all gathered, not in conflict, but in great-hearted fellowship. The beast tamed, a moment of unexpected grace. The mood of the crowd is not fear, it's delight. It looks like everyone's on holiday. The women are shedding their coats, moving freely, stretching in the sun. They have paralyzed the police with their beauty. Then the reinforcements arrive and the battle begins. A flash of light off a cop's baton. And she is in Berlin, running down the sidewalk that bloody May Day 8 years ago through the tear gas and the shouts, caught between the orders to stop and the calls to run. She will not run, not this time. Hand in hand, facing the lines, she lifts her chin and all she feels is calm and righteous exhilaration. So as I continued to work on my book, Leah's past started to feel more and more like my present. She lived through the Spanish flu in 1917 through about 1920. The COVID pandemic hit. The riots in Charlottesville made me think of her battle with fascism, both in Berlin and actually in smaller ways in Quebec and in Canada. Her struggle for choice for women felt really resonant as I read about somebody who, took women for illegal abortions in a period in which that was a death sentence and who campaigned for years for the right to choose. Her struggles are our struggles. Her past is our present. But what struck me about Leah is that whatever happened, she didn't seem powerless. She always did something. She talked about her parents teaching her that the important thing in life was to not just write a check, but to get involved, to do something. And when I was writing this book in March of 2020, doing something felt really impossible. I think that one of the reasons I was drawn to this story and this heroine who's really different from my other books and my other heroines is that she was so vigorous and so active, so hopeful, kind of the heroine I needed at that moment of the COVID pandemic and pause and inertia and grief, maybe the heroine that more of us need right now. That's my timer. Thank you guys so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hold on, my timer is going to go off in 1 second. That was amazing. That was great, Ariela. Thank you. I have a bunch of questions, but I am going to hold my questions for the end. And I am going to introduce our next author. Moshe Mikanovsky is a software engineer and product management leader who turns his creativity towards building software products, hosting a podcast, creating visual art, and writing. Moshe participates in the National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, and in 2013, he began writing The Resurrector, which came out earlier this year. It's his debut novel. Moshe loves mentoring and coaching product managers and startup founders, helping them realize their entrepreneurial dreams. And we have a lot to talk about as a product person and a product marketing person, but we'll leave that aside. Moshe lives with his wife and his 3 daughters in Toronto. So Moshe, let me to unmute yourself and I'm gonna spotlight you. There we go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie, and really great to be here with everyone today and with Ariela and Maria. Really nice meeting you and hearing about your stories as well. So yeah, originally I'm from Israel, and these days I live in Toronto, as Julie mentioned. Writing wasn't really the first thing that I was thinking of when I grew up or anything. I always had, like, I love stories, I love reading stories, etc. The Resurrector is my first story, and it just or first book that I published, and it took me quite a bit of time. In the introduction, Julie mentioned over there that I wrote it in NaNoWriMo 2013. And I only published it this January. So it's been like an 8 years journey. Most of that time I was actually thinking it's not good enough, I'm not good enough, etc., etc. And I still try to push on. One of the main reasons I tried to push on to actually publish it was to give my girls, I have 3 daughters, to give them this, I always want to be a role model to them. So that was one of these things. You have a dream, you do it, you don't give up, you push through, and you get to where you're trying to get. And that was really the only reason I tried to publish it. But then some people read it and they liked the book, and I really hope that other people will find it interesting as well. So as you can see behind me, I always like to do some creative stuff. This is some of the paintings that I used to paint in the past. These days I'm not painting so much. I switched to writing, mainly because it's actually way less expensive to write. When you paint, you have to buy all the materials. It's the paint is expensive. Everything is costing money, and then you have this bunch of paintings and you try to sell them, and trying to sell them was also very hard for me when I tried to do that. And you kept with a bunch of paintings, and now my entire house has my paintings because I did sell most of them. So in 2013, during the November 2013, my daughter, she was oldest daughter, she was in grade 9 back then, and she is very creative in writing. She has really this affinity to writing, and she can express herself. And she decided back then that she wants to participate in NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month. And I was like, what is that? And she explained it to me. So I'm like, you know what, let me do it with you, why not? So during that month, for 30 days, we sat down and we wrote 50,000 words novel. Now you can imagine how good it was. It was pretty bad. And that's the idea, to not to think about the editing, not to think about the quality, but to think about the story and come up with a story and write down the story. And we invited some of her friends that wanted to do it with her to these NaNoWriMo parties that we, for hours on Sundays, we were sitting together and writing and, munching some snacks and stuff like that. One day we went on the subway in Toronto with lots of people from Toronto that were participating in NaNoWriMo from Finch subway station, which is all the way in the north, and it's a big U if you know Toronto subway system. So we were going all the way to the other side and all the way back on the train, just sitting down in one of the cars and writing together. So it was really an event. But the interesting thing was that at the beginning of that month, I had a nugget of an idea for a story. And at the end of the month, I had a story. I had a full story that I created throughout that month. And then for several years, I edited and changed it. And I got some beta readers. I went to University of Toronto Continual Studies to learn about creative writing, because I knew that I don't know anything about it. So I learned a lot about the story arc and different ways to write dialogue and monologues, etc. And eventually I was able to publish it with this hybrid publisher, New Degree Press, in January. So I'm very drawn to stories that have magical realism in them. So not like high fantasy with dragons and stuff like that, and not like dark stuff, but more like things that are in the realm of the reality, but has some magic in them that is unexplained or whatever it is. And the nugget of the idea that I had back then was, what if it actually came from the daily tefillah from Mechaya Mitim. The Hebrew word, the Hebrew name for the book, it's much better. Mechaya Mitim, I think it's a much better name than the Resurrector, but I couldn't call it Mechaya Mitim in English because no one will understand what it means or pronounce it. So the closest thing was to call it the Resurrector. But the idea was, in the tefillah or in the Jewish belief, Mechaya Mitim is in the future when the Messiah is going to come. There is going to be this resurrection of all the dead, etc. And I was thinking, what if we don't wait until then? And what if there is an opportunity for someone to be able to bring someone from the dead to his family? So I placed the story in a Shiva house, where there is a Shiva house for someone that passed away. And the stranger is coming to the Shiva house, and he's basically giving someone and the family over there the opportunity to see their loved ones again. And that was the nugget of that idea. So I started looking into my background, and they tell you to write what you know. So I put it in. I grew up in Bnei Brak, in a modern Orthodox family, and I envisioned in my head like the Shiva house when my dad was sitting Shiva for my grandmother, and that's what I wrote. But the family is the story is completely fiction. It's just that I was able to draw from my experience, the looks of the city, the smells of the house, the different things like that to put into the story. And the story is talking about a family that the mother passed away a few years ago, and now one of the sons passed away suddenly. And the remaining father and brother and a sister are sitting Shiva on that son. And then the stranger comes to the Shiva house. And if you have ever been to an Orthodox Shiva house, especially in Bnei Brak, many of the times you don't know even who is coming to the house. It's not people that you even know. It's a lot of people that just need a place for a minyan. So they will come for mincha, they come for mariv, and they will just do a mitzvah of nichum avelim, and that stranger just come in with like other strangers, and he touches the father, and all of a sudden something happens over there, and the father starts having these visions of his dead son. The father's name is Chaim. The son's name that died is Nir, and there is a lot of symbolism in the story, and the story is going through these two narratives. One narrative is like in this world where the Shiva happens, and everyone and they start to have some rumors because the father started to talking about seeing his dead son. So they have some rumors and about who is this resurrector, who is this stranger, and then there is all of these interesting characters are coming into the Shiva, and they say that there is this phenomenon of Mechaya Mitim that happened before, and they're trying to find out who is that person. And then there is the remaining brother, his name is Ram. He is what is called in Israel Chozer B'She'ela or Tadlash. So he used to be he grew up in religious, but now he's not religious anymore. He's in the army, and he is a very much like realistic, and he doesn't believe in anything they're saying. Where the father is going through these motions of, really believing in what's going on. So this is one narrative. And then the other narrative, the parallel narrative, is the father going through this dreamscape where he is led by his dead son, Nir. And Nir is really trying to show that they had a conflict between them. The father, they had some problems between them that were unsolved, and through the story there is that how do these problems are being solved. So, and then there is the end that I don't want to share what the end is, because there is some if I will share it, it will be a big spoiler. But the idea of the story is to put it in this magical realism aspect, but not so much to. It's not the core of the story. The core of the story is a relationship between the father and the son. The core of the story is, what happens if there is some open, unresolved issues between loved ones, and then suddenly someone passed away and you can't really resolve them. Basically don't wait until it's too late. But then that's really what I was trying to get through the story. And one of the other things is also that, I love reading this type of stories, but in general books, you don't find many of them with the Jewish themes. One of my favorite authors is Stephen King, and Stephen King is not a horror writer, in my opinion. He's more of like psychological and magical realism / fantasy writer. But he drives a lot of his stories from Christianity. Although I don't think he's a big believer, because a lot of it is very sarcastic. But still, there is a lot of that in there. So one of the books that I really loved reading was The Golem and the Genie, that has this golem part in it. But I felt that there is not enough stories out there that include Jewish themes that are also with the fantasy or magical realism, and that's where I try to put it in there. I want to read a quick. It's a very short chapter, so I hope I have enough time to read that. This is the chapter where the first time that Chaim gets that first vision of his son, and what happens over there. So the stranger came to the Shiva house. He touched him. He gave him this strange power, and then what happens next? So this is actually chapter 2, which is from Chaim's perspective. And this is the cover of the book, by the way. I stand on the beach. The wind blows behind me, ruffling my hair and the tail of my shirt. Where am I? How did I get here? The air is cold. The wind changes direction and it sprays sand and water in my face. I can taste the salt on my tongue. Sand particles find their way into my ears, down my cloth, through the collar of my shirt, and under the layers of tzitzit and sleeveless undershirt. My shoes become heavy and uncomfortable as they too fill quickly with the beige substance. I raise one hand to shield my eyes. For the briefest moment, my mind registered that my other hand is holding a hard object, small and smooth and warm. The wind, however, is too strong, and I'm busy protecting myself from its wrath. The sky has turned a sickly orange tint. The ocean breaks ahead of me with crashing waves, one following the other so rapidly that the sea cannot rest in between. I sense movement around me, crabs scurrying around, looking for mates and food. Loner seagulls dive, trying to fish one last meal before nightfall. There is more, larger than the crabs and the seagulls, a human, right there on the beach. Near. But how can it be? Near is here, right here in front of me. His back is towards me, but I recognize him and would do so even if the beach had been crowded like on the hottest summer day. Now the strip of land is deserted. Nir and I are the only people here. My son crouches on the sand where the water reaches the shore. He looks so skinny, his shoulder hunched, his hair too long for my liking. Nir never liked to listen, even about the little things. And this stupid Dutch t-shirt, he loved it and wore it to threads. I see the holes in the back, his skin exposed. He's as pale as a bleached fabric. I also recognize his Bermuda shorts. Sarah bought them for him. My heart misses a beat. Using his bare hands, Nir plays in the sand. Breaking the surface of the wet sand, he picks mud from the small round trench and piles it in the middle of the circle. He lets the water drip on the pile, the mud forming a magical mountain, a black mound of tiny stalagmites. The wind, water, and sand don't seem to bother him. His focus is on the sand and the magical little mound. Nir, I call him. I move forward, thinking the wind will help me, push me toward him. Instead, I must push with all my might against a power as intense as an army tank, fighting, shoving me, not allowing me to get any closer. Nir doesn't hear me. He continues playing in the sand. Nir, answer me, I cry. His back is stubbornly facing me, while the white t-shirt stretched on his body. The wave keeps crashing forcefully, the sea pushing itself on shore with every new foamy arch. Nir, be careful, stay away from the water. He keeps sitting there, his hands digging deeper and deeper, the crashing waves nearly touching his feet. What I forgot to mention before I started reading this is that the first chapter, or the prologue, actually explains how Nir actually drowned in the Mediterranean. And this point where I start reading is jumping right away from the Shiva house, where it's very crowded, there is a lot of people, it's very stuffy and it's closed, to all of a sudden he is on the shore and there is no one in there. The only person you see, or the only one you see, is Nir, and he is trying to warn him about not to get into the water, because this is what is going to be his demise. So yeah, again, thank you so much for having me here, and I hope that people will have some questions, and I think my time is over.
Yeah, perfect timing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to introduce our third author, Maria. I'll ask you to unmute in the meantime. Maria Espinosa is a novelist, poet, and translator, as well as a teacher. Her publications include 5 novels: Incognito, Journey of a Secret Jew; Dark Plums; Longing, which received an American Book Award, as well as Dying Unfinished, which received a Josephine Miles Award for Literary Excellence from Penn Oakland. Her 5th and most recent novel, Suburban Souls, tells a tale of Jewish German Holocaust survivors in 1970s San Francisco. She also has published 2 collections of poems, Love Feelings and Night Music, and a critically acclaimed translation of George Sand's novel, Layla. Maria lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So let me spotlight you now, and then you can take it away. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. See, there's so much to say. And how much time do I have? 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'll start with this last novel, Suburban Souls, with a rather horrific cover. And it really follows a thread of previous novels, though it's a completely different story. But really, I've always been fascinated by how people relate, how they don't relate to each other, and all the kinds of tragedies that happen when they are not really able to get through to each other. So Suburban Souls is the story of a Jewish couple that survived the Holocaust. They got out of the country in time, but they've still been affected by it quite deeply. And they live in suburban San Francisco, a suburb of San Francisco, in the early 1960s. So I suppose you could really call it a historical novel because it's so far back in time. They have 3 children, 2 girls and an infant son. They are very unhappy with each other. The man, Saul, is the provider, is a scientist, works in a laboratory for the University, Berkeley. And he is very, how can I say, withdrawn, not able to express his emotions. And she, on the other hand, is very emotional, very undisciplined in her emotions, and has been traumatized by her childhood in Germany, where she was 6 years old when they got out. And so here she is, really exploding with all kinds of emotions, memories, conflicts, in intimate relations with a man who just seems to shrug her off, dismiss her, doesn't hear her, and this drives her increasingly crazy. And he responds by increasingly going into himself. So that is the crux of the story. He is in the whole movement of the 60s of San Francisco, of exploring, creating new parts of yourself, etc. So he goes and consults with a psychic named, I think her name is Shivaya, and a Danish woman who's totally fake, but totally real at the same time. And he tries to draw some sustenance from that. Neither of them are particularly religious. He had grown up in a very strict Orthodox family, which he found quite stifling. And then he spent the war years in a kibbutz in Israel and was in the army. And she, on the other hand, her family migrated to Chicago in the early 40s. So they have similar but very different backgrounds. And they have 3 children. The oldest is particularly affected by the conflict between her parents, and her mother is quite abusive. So she runs away and joins a commune, a Buddhist hippie commune in the mountains, in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The story then revolves around her and what happens to her. She becomes pregnant. What she decides to do, again, brings the whole thing to a great climax. And in the end, she decides to ignore her mother's advice and to go ahead and have the baby with or without a husband. And so that's that story. I want to say that it is the most recent in a whole chain of novels that I've written. The first one was called Dark Plums, and very different story, but the same kind of theme going through it underneath. Dark Plums is totally fictional, about a prostitute in the, I think, the late 50s in Manhattan who falls in love with a pimp, very charming guy, an artist. And what happens to her at the end is that, again, a kind of enlightenment, perhaps. I don't know what to call it. And then the next one is really quite autobiographical, actually, called Longing. And again, it's fictionalized, but again, based very much on my life. This is the one that I think I'm closest to, this one, which won an American Book Award. Again, it's about a very dysfunctional, conflicted family and a very intense mother-daughter relationship that just doesn't go right at all. And then again, how she falls in love with someone who's almost a variation on the pimp, but he's also a kind of a guru, and he really enlightens her. Antonio, who's South American. And he really leads her out of this morass of insanity that was her family. Then the next novel also goes into the same family, but from really the mother's voice, called, what's it called? Dying Unfinished. Because there's just a lot of my mother that I really wanted to put into some kind of a story. She was so full and so rich, and there was so much that needed to be told that she never managed to tell, that she never managed to put down. And then long ago, I also wrote a historical novel. Where can I find it? Oh, here it is, Incognito. And again, as in all my novels, these have a Jewish theme underlying this. This is a very Jewish theme. It is about a Jew who has to disguise himself in order to survive during the Inquisition. So he escapes Spain in the 15th century, late in the 15th century. And again, all that he goes through, again, I was drawn to it because it really seemed to draw on my own ancestry in some way, the way my family has hidden its Jewishness on my mother's side, and the kind of inner sense of sadness that aroused in me from a very young age, to be divorced from your roots, to be forcibly divorced. So I kept going back to it in my novels. Let's see, I guess I can read a short excerpt from Dying Unfinished. Where is it? Where did I put it? No, Suburban Souls. That's my last one. Okay, so I'll read just from the very beginning. The opening. Prologue, spring 1961. Mirages rose on the endless concrete, shining glimmers that vanished as the storm loomed closer. Air coming through the open window ruffled her hair, as golden as the fabled land of California. My skin is so dry in this desert air, Gerda said. He patted her hand. You're beautiful, Saul reassured her. Huge clouds began to cover the desert sky. Raindrops spattered against the windshield. She thought of how they had first met on a rainy day in Chicago in a crowded cafeteria. May I sit down? He asked. She gestured to the empty chair opposite her. Yes, she said. Her beauty lured him, and for her part, she was drawn to his air of quiet strength and the kindness in his dark eyes. Rain came down harder. A strong wind rose. Rain blurred the desert landscape. Sparse bushes swayed in the wind. The cars sped on towards the unknown where they would build their lives, far from grimy city streets and burdens of the past. Chapter 1, April 1975, some years later. The moon shone brightly through the curtains. Full moon, gauzy curtains, queen bed. Elsewhere in the house, the children slept. He lay heavily over her body. He smelled of his own odor and of men's cologne. His face was focused with effort, his eyes closed, as if he were imagining someone else as he rose above her like a warrior. Was he imagining his former sweetheart, the one who jilted him, or a forbidden blonde Fräulein from his childhood? He thrust deep inside her again and again, gave a final thrust, and then remained quiet, his sex still hard, and her body quickened into spasms. Something in her too released, and she gave a deep sigh. He wrapped his arm beneath her neck, pillowing her. Did you come? His voice held an unaccustomed tone of tenderness. Yes, she murmured. He rolled over, his back curled against her. Soon he began to snore, while she lay awake and gazed at the beam of moonlight. Desire still ran through her body. A nameless fear seized hold of her. Clinging to the comfort of Saul's warm body, she nudged him in the ribs. What is it? Tell me everything will be all right. Yes, he mumbled. Saul, tell me. How do I know? Gerda, let me sleep. For a long time, she lay awake. She bit her lips to keep from screaming. Finally, she went into the bathroom and washed off the liquid between her thighs, examined herself in the mirror. Haggard face, dark eyes, wild blonde hair. Took a sleeping pill from the cabinet and swallowed it. Wandered into the kitchen, 3 a.m. The moon shone even more brightly in the kitchen, lighting up the stainless steel appliances, the stove, the refrigerator. Shining instruments, pitiless, she thought, pitiless and shining. And I'll just read the first paragraph of the next one. Saul. The alarm rang at 6 a.m. Saul got out of the warm bed while his Gerda slept on, breathing softly. A strap of her nightgown had slipped. On the impulse, he softly kissed her shoulders. She didn't stir. He went into the bathroom, brushed his teeth, washed his face with cold water, dressed quickly, gulped down a glass of grapefruit juice, grabbed the briefcase, and walked to the hill, where he waited for the bus under a pale dawn sky. While his seatmate leaned through the pages of the San Francisco Chronicle, Saul turned to a novel by Amos Oz. It made him nostalgic to read about Jerusalem and life on a kibbutz. And there I'll stop. And I don't know, how much time do I have?
No, you had another minute or two, but it's okay. We can.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Anyway, the novel goes on, and how can I say, right now I'm writing another novel, which seems to have been stalled enormously due to COVID and due to myself, I suppose. And again, it kind of weighs until I finish. In my novel, the Incognito, there's a chapter in the book about a mystic who writes endlessly and then throws his writings into the fire, saying, you know, it doesn't matter if my writings burn, because they're there in the etheric sphere. In the Akashic records, they live forever. So there are several other kind of surrealistic, or you could call magic realistic moments in the Jewish historical novel. And there are a few of these moments in this novel too, because I do actually believe in a kind of reality that we're tangible reality and intangible reality somehow intersect in some way. And I wouldn't even call it magical because it's real, but it's a different sphere of reality. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. I'm gonna add all of our authors to the spotlight now, and you can put your questions in the chat. I'll add myself as well. I have various questions, but I'll see if anybody else wants to go first with their questions. There was a question about books being available in paperback. I think everybody's book is available in paperback and also in Kindle. And Moshe's book is available as an audiobook. You guys, Maria, Ariela, are your books available as audiobooks?
Not this one. I think one of the earlier ones is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm dying to get my book as an audiobook. I haven't done it yet. I haven't dealt with it yet, but we'll see. Okay, so see, our audience has not put other questions in the chat yet, so I will start with my question. I guess my first question is for Ariela. You said, well, I have two questions for you. One is, you were talking about how life is not a novel and you have to decide what to put in to your novel and what not. Like, so question A, you know, which parts of her life didn't make it into the novel? I'm curious to see, because I read the novel, I enjoyed it. And like you, by the way, I didn't know much about the labor movements or anything going on in Montreal in the 30s. I found that all very interesting. So which parts of her life didn't make it into the book? And also, you've mentioned that she was the heroine that you needed at that time. And aside from her inspiring you to write the book, did she inspire you to do other things also, like become an activist or not, you know, or in some way do something similar? So that's my first.
Yeah. So more than half of her life didn't make it into the book. I decided to write a novel about somebody who lived for almost 97 years.
Oh, wow.
And who was active like almost all the way throughout. And initially I didn't know how much of the story I was going to be able to tell. And one of the things that inspired me about her was that she was an activist in her 70s and her 80s. There's a film about her by Sophie Bissonnette called A Vision in Darkness. And you can see her, and she's got like white hair and this bright blue beret, you know, and she's campaigning on the street. Again, I wasn't lucky enough to meet her, but I know all these people who knew her. And one of them said, you know, she loved to drink wine, but when she got to her 70s, she said, I can't drink wine anymore because I need to march. I need the energy to march in the morning. So she was incredibly vital and had so many different causes. She intersected with so many different interesting people, and she lived so many different places. I pretty soon realized that I needed to be more constrained. This book covers 40 years of her life, which is a long time, and has a bunch of different locations. It's in the Soviet Union, it's in Berlin, it's in Paris, it's in Montreal, it's in New York. At a certain point, I started just cutting things out. Like, there's a way in which it becomes too crowded to be meaningful. So there's two different arcs that I chose. I ended the book when she was about the age I was when I started writing the book. And I ended it in 1945 because it seemed like a really dramatic moment to end the Second World War is over. So the book includes the First and Second World War. The Communist Party is no longer illegal in Canada. And the candidate that she's working with has just gotten elected. So it's this moment of relief and triumph for her. It's also a moment that is prior to a whole lot of trouble that I kind of foreshadow. You're just on the edge of the Cold War, and the man she gets elected is going to get arrested for conspiracy. He's actually going to end up being the only member of parliament ever convicted on charges of conspiracy. So it is a turning point in her life. Initially, I thought maybe I will write the second half of this as a sequel. I don't know if I can do it or not, but I do think that she deserves a full biography. I think biographies need to tell all of the things that aren't dramatically like extra exciting. So I want to give somebody else that job. In terms of your second question, yeah, I started volunteering. I was writing about this woman and reading this book, and the whole city was shut down. And I started driving for the food bank, which was not something that I'd done for like maybe a little over a decade, because I would say that I was more active in these ways probably before I had kids, or even when my kids were quite young. I would take them in their strollers to marches and stuff. And then I had this period of kind of retreat, probably just busyness and laziness maybe. So yeah, I started making chili for this shelter downtown. I started driving for the food bank. I went to a bunch of the marches that, were in the summer of 2021. So yeah, I felt too guilty just writing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
it was a good change for me, actually. That also helped me feel hopeful. I think one of the things that I sort of learned from her is when you do things, you feel less hopeless about it.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't sort of change things necessarily like large scale, if you're engaged small scale in actions, it is very helpful for you, not just for the people that you're engaged with.
Yeah. Mea chuz, as we say over here. Yes, definitely, I agree with that. Okay. By the way, you all feel free to ask each other questions also, Ariela, Moshe, and Maria. I wanted to ask, Ariela, you already mentioned kind of your aha moment at the end of that tour when you found out about Leah, that you decided you wanted to write about her. But Maria and Moshe, maybe you could talk about, like, did you have like one moment of inspiration? Maria, you have many novels, so pick one of them to answer this question for. But actually, in our last Literary Modiin, one of the authors referred to it as a glorious moment or something like that. So did you have a glorious moment where that spark of the idea, tell us a little bit about that.
You talking to me at this point?
But yeah, it's a question for you and Moshe. One of you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll let you answer. Go ahead, Maria.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, it's was more about like a what if that created that. But there are things in our lives that are definitely, even if we're writing fiction, and I'm sure it's not just me, I'm sure it's many other writers, maybe everyone, that we kind of bring from our own experiences into the stories of our characters. And then it's almost like catharsis for ourselves, or at least for me. It almost felt like maybe this character will behave differently from the way I behaved, and it will kind of solve a problem that I didn't solve in the right way, or things like that. So it's almost give you that freedom to play with that. What if, not just the scenario, but what if I would have done something differently? And the nice thing about it is that people that read the book, they don't really know what's real, what's not in the book. It's all fiction, so it doesn't really matter. And maybe people that know me better than others, people that are very close to me, might be able to tell, oh, this reminds me of that, and this reminds me of that. But I think that building up the story and getting the idea, and then trying to pepper it with my own experiences kind of helped me also realize things about my life that are very personal, but still are quite helpful, even if I wouldn't even publish the book, which is really cool.
Maria, do you have an answer to my question?
Well, I suppose that really writing the novels for me are unlocking puzzles, like endless puzzles of what creates a human being. And each novel has also unraveled sort of my own self and helped unify me in some way. But beyond that, there's what almost a kind of a mystical or almost religious sense that these are books that I have to write, and they're not only for me, therefore some kind of message to give out to whoever wants to hear them or is ready to hear them or read them. And somehow it feels like this is something I have to do. And I never really wanted to be a writer, but some inner voice was very strong and said, this is what you do. This is what you were born to do, like it or not, published or unpublished. Almost like the character who throws his writings into the fire and says, therefore the Akashic records, something there.
Yeah, I identify with a lot with both of what you said just now, the catharsis for ourselves and doing it for ourselves. I mean, I found that when when I was writing my book, it's a novel and story, so I just wanted to get each story to be entertaining and compelling and feel authentic. But then when I put it together as a collection, as a novel and stories, and I started getting questions like, is there a narrative arc, and what is the takeaway, and like once the book came out and I had to do all these interviews and I was getting asked these questions, what's the takeaway? It's sort of it kind of continued to be a revelatory process for me, like, oh, that's why I wrote that, like, like, and also for me, Moshe, mine took, I don't know, maybe 5 years to write, another 3 years to find a publisher. Like, it was a long process, probably 9 years from when I first wrote the first, draft of the first story till when the book came out. So I was getting lots of questions like, why did you decide to do this? And I have to think back. I'm like, why did I decide to do that? But then I somehow my subconscious, like came up with the answer. But I definitely think that it's for me, writing it keeps me healthy. I don't know, it's a weird way to say, but like I need to. I mean, I can't say that I write every single day. I don't write on Shabbat. But I do try to write every day a bit because I start my day better that way if I've done some writing. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting about the subconscious, what you mentioned, because people ask me about the names of characters in the book and some of the symbolism in the book. And some of them were just things that came to me. They're not necessarily had much of an intention. But then when I try to analyze them in that way, or when I hear what people took from that, there is actually some meaning that it's very relevant to the story. So it's very interesting.
Okay, Maria, you have a question here. Did your family originate in Spain and have any experience?
Yes, my mother's family did, and very much. In fact, my nephew has traced our family back to some very famous poet in the 6th century who was also a warrior. I have his books of anthology of his poems here, and I can't think of it. Samuel Hanagid, I think was his name.
Wow.
But more recently, I still have a portrait, which is a copy of a portrait of a great-great-great-great-grandmother that was done in Belgium after they left Spain. And they left Spain during the, I think, late in the 17th century, late 1600s. They went to Belgium to escape the Inquisition, and there they prospered, and there's a portrait of her. I have a copy of it. I wanted to even show it to you, but it's in my house somewhere, and I'd have to get off here, the screen, to find it. She's a very forbidding looking woman. She looks a little like one of my nieces.
Shmuel Hanagid is very famous. So. That's cool. Yichus.
Pretty incredible literary ancestor to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's pretty
quite,
extraordinary.
but quite a long ways back. He was
Yeah.
also a warrior, and he had a son whom he didn't think was very much of. So I'm also descended from the son. And then I think of all the women through the thousands of years of history that have gone by since then, and who intermarried with who.
Right. Okay, we have another question about what you're all working on now. Are you working on a new novel? Who wants to go first? Moshe, go first.
Yeah, I am working on a new novel, which actually started in NaNoWriMo 2014. So it's also very long in the process. But because I was working on The Resurrector, that one actually was really not touched since then. And it doesn't have a very deep Jewish theme, although it has some Jewish characters, but it's a more of bit of a magical realism that happened in Toronto, of all places, in the subway system. And it's called Lady Subway, and it's this story about the announcer, the voice announcer on the subway stations. She basically, well, it's a recording voice, we all know, but she is tired of being trapped in the subway for so many years and announcing the stations, and she decides to kidnap one of the train cars with all the people in it until the system let her go and go somewhere else. And that's the premise of the story. So that's what I'm working on now.
I like that. What I'm working on now are 3 unfinished novels that I just feel I have to finish. One is about really Berkeley in the 80s, kind of all the people who were so affecting and what in my life and their stories, and it's really their stories. The other is a kind of series of erotic sketches. Again, all this is roughed out but not completed. And then finally, there's a story I've been stalled on forever. It seems a short story about my father, in which I try to create him and the very complex, tangled relationship I had with him, very close. But at the same time, I really am dying to get out of my own life and into more interesting subjects. I used to tell ghost stories when I was a child, and my brother would say, "Why don't you write more of these ghost stories?" And I could, but still there's some kind of voice inside me saying, you've got to write these stories. It has something to do with psychic wholeness, and it's not only for you alone. You're meant to put them out in the world, not bury them as I do my diary. But I wanted to say one last thing. Moshe's story about the subway voice who's imprisoned makes me think of my own memory. When I was about 4 years old, I'd lie in my bed, and my bed was next to the wall. On the other side, there was a family called the White family. And at night, I could talk to the White family who were on the other side of the wall. Anyway, I'd like to write more stories, more in that vein.
Ariela, what about you?
So my book just came out a couple months ago, and I'm trying to write my way into the next project, which is a bit of a scary thing to do. And even though I've published 3 books now, every single time I think, well, that's it. I don't know. So I'd love to hear from Maria about how you kind of keep the faith with the wandering in the wilderness, which is the experience of going from book to book. Because I feel like even though I've emerged like 3 times, it still seems impossible.
I heard a good tip about this one from Anne Napolitano, who wrote Dear Edward. She's also an editor at One Story at Brooklyn. And I heard her give a talk about like the writing life, and it was all about, stick to what you, like pay attention to what you're really curious about. Like like as if you have a magnet on your chest, and like, what are the newspaper articles you keep going back to, and what are you, like at the time when she gave that talk, she said she was really interested in the football player, I forget his name, who Colin, the one who was taking the knee all the time. And she's like, I'm sure maybe I'm going to have to write about him someday because I'm just so interested. I'm just like fascinated by this story. So you pay attention to the stories you keep coming back to, or that's shout out at you from the news or whatever, and that's how you know what you might want to write about. So
that's good advice. One
Yeah.
of the things that I like about it is it really puts the emphasis on the process. I feel like jumping ahead to the thing that you're going to create and how it's going to exist in the world is too huge a leap, especially at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Question for you, Moshe. Are you watching the Russian Doll about subway magic?
Oh, I watched the first season, which I loved. I think there is a second season now or something, but I didn't watch that yet. But yes, thank you for the recommendation, because I should. And the inspiration to write it was way before COVID, when I was commuting to work on the subway. So I was actually writing on the subway. So that's the
I don't know
only
what the
time I
subways are
found
like.
to write.
Yeah, I don't know what the subways are like in Toronto, but that's impressive. Like I take the train to work, and from Modiin to Tel Aviv, and that's very conducive to writing because we have our little tables, and I just try to ignore anybody I know, and I'm like, right. But there I have a table. I can open my laptop and
I
but
wrote
I
actually
imagine
on
the
my
subway you don't
phone.
have a table like that.
I wrote on my phone of
Oh
all
my
places.
goodness. Wow.
I know.
So Ellen asked a question, but I just want to say it out loud for everybody here, in case anybody here runs a book club. She was asking if our authors tonight would speak to a book group on Zoom without charge, and they all said yes. So anybody here on this call that runs a book club, feel free. And tomorrow I send around the links about how to contact everybody, and how to buy their books and all that. So if you run a book club, feel free to reach out to any of our authors or me. I spoke at Ellen's book club Cactus Sport chapter in Phoenix, but you also run another one, I know. Anyway, okay. Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, while you're thinking of your last questions, if you have, I'm taking Literary Modiin is taking a vacation in August because I don't really have any Sundays that I can do this. So we will be back on Sunday, September 18th, the week before Rosh Hashanah. So mark your calendars. I'm finalizing the details of that soon. And yeah, and I already have the dates for September and October. September is September 18th, and October is October 23rd. So enjoy your August without hearing me on a Sunday night. Oh, okay, Amy, good question. How do I find the authors? Some people approach me, and sometimes I approach somebody. It's and lately I've been getting a lot of people approaching me. It's very subjective. It's about like, what books do I want to read? I'm sorry. So that's it's pretty subjective. And I'm always paying attention to the book reviews in the Jewish press. I saw one in the forward the other day that sounded interesting. Actually, I got to write to that guy. Yeah, it's a mix of me approaching people and people approaching me. So I know, Maria, we had one of your fellow authors from your publisher appeared. I think that's how you got to me. Your LB Williams, was she published by your?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So her
Yes.
book, what's it called? Forget Russia.
Russia. Oh, yes. A
About
very
a
good
year
memoir.
ago, a year and a half ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've become good friends. In fact,
Yeah.
it's actually up to her that I'm on this program.
Yeah.
Thanks to her.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. thank you especially to Maria, Moshe, and Ariela. It's great to have you all here, and thank you to everybody who attended tonight. I will see you on September 18th. Have a great night. Have a great or day wherever you are. Have a great rest of your summer. Happy reading, everyone.
Thank you
very
Julie.
much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for having us.
Julie,
Okay.
was it your birthday last week?
Yesterday was my this is my birthday literary Modiin event. Yesterday.
Oh,
Happy birthday.
Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.
Thank you.
I hope it's a
Thank you.
wonderful year.
Okay, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.